Climate change, a phenomenon that has increased the frequency of incidences of drought, flooding, groundwater overdraft, land and water degradation. According to the Ministry of Water Resources, water demands have increased faster than population growth, and currently more than one-third of the nation's population live in basins that experience medium to high water stress. This week, we look at water resources management and regulation. Welcome to Dateline Abuja. I'm Ibrahim Adra. This year's National Children's Day celebration was marred by the COVID-19 pandemic, but the Federal Capital Territory Administration had a special session to discuss issues affecting children. The FCT minister held the event on behalf of the president.
Empty chairs at the Eagle Square on Children's Day says it all. The 2020 National Children's Day will not be celebrated with its usual pomp and pageantry. The flagpoles are empty. No speeches, no bands, no marches, no schools, no teachers, nothing. COVID-19 deals Children's Day a hard blow. Since the 31st of March this year, schools have been closed across the country. At the time, no one thought the schools would be closed for this long.
I was watching video of people. That's I did. That's how.
Emeka is a performing arts teacher. His school closed before the 31st, when parents raised concerns about the pandemic. Although studies have continued online, departments such as his are badly hit.
It's not easy. For me, like I said, I'm a performance art teacher. It's easy to engage kids online and tell them to do mathematics, teach them something about English, or trying to develop them. But my kind of work, I need to work with them practically. I need to see them. I can't be telling them things theoretically only, like how it's supposed to be done. I'm supposed to show them how it's done, and of course we can't do that right now because of social distancing and all that stuff. So it's not been easy. It's been really hard. And we, the instructors, the teachers, were complaining. This is not the life we thought was going to happen, or would, but it happened, and it's sad. Kids are complaining, they wish to be back in school, meet their friends, associate, have fun, but they can't have that right now because this is the new normal. This year, as you can see, it's pretty much like a dead zone. This is very quiet. Today's Children's Day, and it's sad we can't have kids come out and celebrate because everybody's scared for their lives, everybody's concerned for their safety and all of that.
Children's Day is usually a big deal in this school, with parties and parades, but not this year. Some students speak on how they're coping with staying at home and what they miss about Children's Day.
That we stay at home, not have fun and go out. It's kind of boring, but I still enjoy staying at home. And why I enjoy staying at home, because I get to bake and make other stuff that I like, and it's really nice. Gisting, having fun with my friends, eating together and having fun.
So what's like the high point of Children's Day in this school for you?
High point.
What do you enjoy the most about Children's Day?
Getting along with people, going to see orphanage. It's really nice seeing people that don't have their family around them, and it's nice seeing them and having fun with them.
Yeah, I miss going out with my friends, having fun with everyone. Yeah, like we usually go out and all. We have fun, go to places that we've never been to and all, and have fun with other people.
Ways to protect ourselves from COVID-19 pandemic.
The celebration moves indoors as some members of the Federal Executive Council interact with young people. Aside from education, children are facing other challenges under the COVID-19 pandemic.
From daily reports reaching us, it is evident that COVID-19 has increased the rate of violence against our children, especially the young child. who is more exposed to rape, even from close relatives as their fathers and brothers. No doubt that COVID-19 has greatly affected livelihoods, but that is not an excuse for such high level of violence against children currently reported. I wish to appeal to the boys to ensure that they protect girls from harm and all other forms of actions that prevent them from staying in school or attending school. I also wish to call on parents to keep an eye on the company their children keep, while also paying attention to their emotional needs, as well as protecting them from activities of unpredictable means and dangerous social media content. I urge all children to speak out if they are facing any form of violence or they see any form of violence being perpetrated against fellow children, either in the home, in the school, or within their communities.
According to the United Nations Children's Fund, the girl child constitutes 60% of the 13.5 million out-of-school children in Nigeria. This is in spite of the provisions of the 1999 Constitution, which guarantees the right to education for all children. The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory represented President Muhammadu Buhari at the conversation, and he highlights some of the interventions that the government will be carrying out to ensure the protection of children.
This administration's determination to ensure that the girl child enjoys her full rights, the federal government directed that all girls must be enrolled and must attend schools. The homegrown school feeding program designed to promote enrollment, retention and completion rate of children up to junior secondary schools. The national strategy to end girl child and other cultural practices, to end girl child marriage and other cultural practices and social norms militating against the girl child education constitute part of other strategies put in place by government to address issues militating against the effective participation of girls in school. To ensure sustenance of actions to promote the education of the girl child, I have charged the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs to implement the following interventions among others. Firstly, collaborate with the Federal Ministry of Education to increase the enrollment, retention and completion rates of girls in primary and secondary schools across the nation. Secondly, activate an action plan to promote political, social and economic participation of girls and women in Nigeria. Thirdly, urge the domestication of the Child Rights Act by all the states of the Federation. Fourthly, conduct a review and propose amendments to legislation to ensure gender equality and end all forms of discrimination against girls and women. Fifthly, improve health, education, and productivity of Nigerian women and girls. Sixthly, and finally, develop a national strategy framework on menstrual health and hygiene management.
As with most sectors, COVID-19 has added more burden to an already fraught education system in Nigeria. Children's Day usually affords Nigeria an opportunity to look inwards and fix problems in the educational system. These kids are the lucky ones. They can continue their classes online. What happens to children in rural areas who do not have internet and must wait for the pandemic to end before they continue their education? Will Nigeria be dealing with more out-of-school children after this pandemic?
Thanks for staying tuned. COVID-19 is a serious disease and health authorities want us to take the recommendations and precautions seriously to reduce exposure to the virus. So, regular and thorough hand washing with soap and running water is important, or use alcohol-based hand sanitizers. Also, maintain at least 2-meter distance when in public places or with anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Now, let's quickly recap stories that made the headline within the week in the nation's capital.
President Muhammadu Buhari was joined by members of his immediate family as they observed the Eid prayer at home. The Eid prayer is usually held at the end of Ramadan with large crowds at various prayer grounds. The president urged Nigerians to observe health advisories to stop the spread of the coronavirus.
COVID-19 has reduced us, when I say us, both the developed and developing country to the same level. In fact, we have less casualties than they have. So it is a very frightening development, and I advise Nigerians to be very careful to take the advice from the Ministry of Health. The Minister of Health has been doing very well, speaking and educating people generally. So Nigerians, we should be very careful.
Meanwhile, the president is calling on developed countries and international financial institutions to cancel the debts of countries he described as needy, especially in Africa, to enable them reverse the devastations of COVID-19. He made the appeal during a high-level United Nations virtual meeting.
There is an urgent need for weak and needy countries, especially those of Africa, to receive a fresh reprieve. This is a historical plague affecting every corner of the globe. In the circumstances, the response needed must be global, unconditional, comprehensive, and rapid. Debts must be forgiven and cancelled.
In the meantime, President Muhammadu Buhari is asking the National Assembly to approve an external loan of $5.513 billion. The loan is to finance the revised 2020 budget, priority project of the federal government on COVID-19, and support for state governments. The request was disclosed as the lawmakers resumed plenary to consider the 2020 revised budget, which scaled second reading in both chambers of the National Assembly. Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo chaired a virtual meeting of the Economic Sustainability Committee, where members interacted extensively with state governors on the forthcoming Economic Sustainability Plan. The meeting was attended by the governors of Ekiti, Kaduna, Ebonyi, Edo, Ogun, Jigawa, and Nasarawa states. Staying with the economy, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank has expressed optimism that the gradual easing of the economy will improve economic activities and reduce the impact of a possible recession in the country owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is one of the outcomes of the committee's meeting.
The positive but lower growth observed during the first quarter of 2020 is expected to dip slightly on the back of the combined monetary and fiscal stimulus by the monetary and fiscal authorities to ensure that growth at this time is supported to avoid a recession.
Nigeria is perhaps another inch closer to finding a local cure for the coronavirus, as the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 says 3 out of the numerous claims have been found deserving for further investigations. At the daily briefing of the task force, the chairman of the task force says the 3 claims have now been forwarded to the relevant agencies.
As a measure of the importance attached to research and development of local capacity for finding a cure for COVID-19, the Federal Minister of Health held a virtual meeting with a number of researchers and scientists with claims to cure of COVID-19. And out of the numerous claimants, 3 were found to deserve further investigation and have been forwarded to the relevant authorities for appropriate review.
Meanwhile, the Minister of State for Education, Mr. Chukwuemeka Nwajuba, says plans are underway to reopen schools in Nigeria, but this may not happen next month, as speculated by some. The Education Minister insists that sanitation facilities in government schools have to be improved on first, and modalities for physical distancing put in place.
For a country that has over 115,000 primary schools, you will understand that 35,000 of these who are private must agree to set up the same standards in order to allow children to go in. Number one, we want all our children, be they at secondary, primary, tertiary institutions, to come into schools by the time they would have done physical distancing. It is the same we're planning for secondary school reopening. We want to bring in our JS children and SSS first. They conclude their exams, vacate the place, use as much of the space as possible, and then others can return. We'll do the same thing with primary schools, where we will now limit the number of children per class. What this may mean also is that we may have classes in the mornings and then have classes in the afternoon.
Welcome back. My guest is the Nigeria Integrated Water Resources Management Commission, Engineer Magashi Bashir, and he talks about water resources management and regulation. Engineer Magashi Bashir, thank you very much for joining us on Dateline Abuja.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about your agency, the Nigeria Integrated Water Resources Management Commission. Now, is one of the agencies that has been recommended by the Orosanye report for scrapping, and largely the reason for some of the recommendations of that Orosanye report is those agencies that have similar schedules or appears to be overlapping duties. What is the difference between your agency, for instance, and the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, as well as the River Basin Authorities?
The Commission is supposed to regulate the sector in terms of standards, in terms of the management aspect of water, and then in terms of also trying to get revenue for government from bulk water users, and also trying to work with sister agencies to enforce and also to see that this regulation is well grounded, put into the right place. The difference between us, the Commission, and the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency is that we are regulators, and they are an arm of government that is supposed to collect data. They are mainly to collect data for water resources development and planning.
Okay, now that's clear. So we know your job is purely regulatory. How has that fared so far?
Yeah, it has not been an easy thing, actually, when we talk of regulation in the country. If we look at NAFDAC, the way they tracked from when they started until date, if we also look at NCC, those that are regulating the telecommunication sector, then we are also, when we look at also the power sector, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission also. So in the water sector, we are supposed to be the ones that will regulate the sector in its entirety in terms of exploration and exploitation.
You did say it hasn't been easy. I mean, I would imagine there are challenges, there are difficulties. What are some of them?
Yeah, of course, there are a lot. We are supposed to issue licenses to people that use bulk water, both surface and groundwater, and also to collect some charges from the use of that, because these waters are being used for commercial purposes. Now we have a bulk people that use bulk groundwater, like the bottling companies. You also have the breweries that are also using bulk groundwater. Sometimes they use surface, but you also have the bottling companies that use water for all sorts of drinks that they produce and all that. So these people are supposed to pay government for the use of that common resource, which is the groundwater or the surface water that they are using.
So that brings me to my next question, where I have a little bit of worry. States, for instance, it's their responsibility to provide water to their people. And here you are issuing licenses. Isn't that outside the jurisdiction of a federal agency like yours?
No, it is not. We have within our own, the Commission is supposed to be a partnership between the federal and the state governments. Now, we encourage the state governments to have regulatory agencies. So far, I think there are 3 in the country, one in Lagos and then one in Kaduna. The other is either in Abia or in one of the southern states. So we are trying to work together with them so that we can work out amicable solutions that can be for the states and also for the federal.
Are you optimistic? Because most projects that have the state and federal government working together, it's not all the time that we see the kind of synergy that is required to move any project forward.
Now, this is beyond a project. This is a synergy that we work together. We are talking about gathering revenue both for the states and for the federal government. Probably a sharing formula will be established when the state collects, or whichever way we're going to work it out between ourselves, and then we will see that we are already working together. I've been to Lagos for so many occasions. I've been to talk on their own when they had an event. We were also invited by the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, organized also by WaterAid and we were there all together, and we did spoke on still the issue of regulation and all that. So I don't think there would be, even if there will be problems, we'll be able to look at them and try to find amicable solutions to them.
Interesting. This is refreshingly different, that we don't have any friction, which is a good thing in itself. Now let's look at the National Water Bill, the proposed National Water Bill, that is. How is that going to make the responsibility of water governance, for instance, and regulation in Nigeria more effective?
Our own bill is, I can say, the first that is at the beginning of the opening of the bill, because you need to have a regulator in a sector if you really want to make a headway. So we are the first in the bill. They are talking about regulatory functions of what we do and what we are going to do, what we need to do also, and how we are going to do it. So this is also covered in the bill.
Does that cover enforcement? Because you may have all the rules, you may have what you need to do and how to do it, but somehow you're powerless when it comes to enforcing. Is that captured?
Yeah, monitoring and enforcement is fully captured. In fact, we have a department in the Commission that is looking at monitoring and enforcement.
Are you looking at having the security agencies, for instance, working with you in terms of enforcement, for instance?
Yes, for sure. We are looking at that already, but we are also looking at the security working with us in terms of water source protection. Now, how do we protect the water sources we have, both surface and underground water? We have a lot of dams, we have a lot of other water sources, wells and all that. These are areas that can be intruded by people, and then many other things can be used against the country, even by outsiders and so on. So this, we are looking at working with them. But in terms of the public, we are not looking at using the police or this to police the industry or that. I think EFCC is there, and then we look at ICPC. We can get them to, we will be talking to them to see how we can enforce most of these things. When people refuse to pay, or when industries refuse to pay what is due for them, we can invite the EFCC in, and then they can play the role they need to play in that area.
Another source of worry is water pollution, and it's a global problem, but we also have our own share. And Nigeria, unfortunately, is also ranked as first when it comes to open defecation, a situation that made the president to declare a state of emergency some time ago. Yeah. Now, tell me, what can be done to address the worsening situation we have, from your perspective?
Yeah, water pollution is really one thing that is really with us because of the open defecation, but also the World Water Day also declared a particular day for emerging pollutants. Now, these are pollutants that really pollute the water. Now, if we take a small aspect of it, which is the sewage, now in Nigeria, we hardly have a central sewage system. Now, all we have are mostly individual, unless in towns like probably Abuja. Now, I think these are obtainable, and probably in the present estates that are growing up everywhere in the country, that you have this central system. Yeah, but even if you have a central system and you do not take care of what you get finally as the sewage and its disposal, there is also a problem, because you don't dispose sewage directly into the rivers. Now, what I've seen in Germany is that they have a lot of processes that they take this through the sewage, which they call oxidation processes. Now, these oxidation processes oxidize the whole material, and they have a lot of series of tanks that crack the bacteria, oxidize the water and all that. Finally, what you get at the end is clean water that is up to 90 to 98% clean. And this water can also go into agriculture for those major sources, for the industry and also for agricultural use.
Engineer Bashir, thank you very much. A whole lot of problems, but I'm sure somehow we'll get around them. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for staying with us. Let's play our part in reducing the spread of the coronavirus. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth, and make sure that you and the people around you follow good respiratory hygiene by covering your mouth and nose with your bent elbow or tissue when you cough or sneeze, and dispose the used tissue immediately and properly. Stay at home if you feel sick and seek medical advice if you have a fever, cough, and difficulty breathing. Now let's continue the conversation online through the email address and Twitter handle on your screen. Also, be sure to share anything that is happening within your locality with us. Let me remind you that you can view the program on youtube.com/channelsweb/videos. I'm Ibrahim Adra. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.